The most respected man in Athens chose to die rather than stop doing what he believed was right. And he wasn't even sure what happened after death. In ancient Greece, around 400 BC, Athens was the kind of city where reputation was everything. What your neighbors thought of you, what the powerful thought of you, that determined your safety, your status, your life. Public opinion wasn't just social pressure, it was survival. And into that world walked a man who spent his entire life doing the one thing nobody wanted him to do, telling people they were wrong. Not to be cruel, not to make enemies, but because he genuinely believed that a life spent chasing approval instead of doing good was a life completely wasted. Most people in Athens knew how the game worked. You said the right things in front of the right people. You praised whoever had power. You kept your real opinions quiet unless they matched what was popular. It was exhausting, and everyone knew it, and everyone did it anyway, because the alternative seemed worse. We have a different name for it now. We call it people-pleasing, or managing your image, or just being smart about how you communicate. The behavior is identical. Say what people want to hear. Avoid the friction. Keep everyone comfortable. Sound familiar? So what did Socrates actually believe that made him willing to lose everything rather than play along? He grew up in Athens as the son of a stonemason, not wealthy, not politically connected. By every normal measure, he had every reason to be careful, to stay quiet, to not make waves. Instead, he became famous across the city for walking up to people who considered themselves wise and asking them questions until they proved, in front of everyone, that they didn't actually know what they thought they knew. Politicians, poets, military generals. He questioned all of them. Not aggressively, with genuine curiosity, but the effect was devastating. These were men whose entire identity rested on being seen as knowledgeable and important. And here was this short, barefoot man with no money asking simple questions that unraveled everything they claimed to know. They hated him for it, obviously. Pay attention to why he kept doing it anyway. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. He genuinely believed that the most dangerous thing a person could do was walk through life, pretending to understand things they didn't, because decisions come from beliefs. And if your beliefs are built on things you've never examined, the decisions you make based on them are going to hurt people. They're going to hurt you. The fog feels comfortable right up until you walk off the edge. His word for this was ignorance, but not the ordinary kind. The dangerous kind was what he called thinking you know something when you don't. He had a name for the better position, knowing that you don't know. He considered that a kind of wisdom, not the finished kind, but the starting kind. And this is where it connects to something most people miss about him. He wasn't just interested in making people look foolish. He was genuinely alarmed by what he saw. He watched respected, intelligent people make decisions about war, about justice, about how to raise their children, based on values they had absorbed from their culture, without ever stopping to ask whether those values were actually good. They were doing what was popular, what was expected, what would get them praised. He asked one question that he kept returning to his whole life. Is the thing being called good actually good? Or is it just popular? Those are not the same question. And most people never notice the difference. The moment this became more than philosophy was the day he was put on trial. He was 70 years old. The charges were corrupting the youth of Athens and not believing in the city's gods. Both charges were more about the fact that he had irritated too many powerful people for too long. Everyone in that courtroom knew the real reason he was there. His friends had a plan to get him out. He could propose exile as his punishment instead of death. Leave Athens, go somewhere else, stop his questioning, live quietly. The jury would almost certainly accept that he could survive. He just had to agree to stop. He refused. Not out of stubbornness. Not because he didn't value his life. He refused because he had spent 70 years saying that how you live matters more than how long you live. That a person who abandons what is right to preserve their safety has already lost something more important than their life. To accept exile on those terms would have meant saying everything he ever believed was negotiable when the pressure got high enough. He wasn't willing to say that. The jury voted to execute him. He spent his last days in prison, calm, still talking to his friends, still asking questions. He drank the hemlock and died the way he lived, without compromise. Think about what that actually costs. Not in a heroic, abstract way, in a real, human way. He had friends. He had people who loved him. He had, presumably, some part of himself that wanted to see the next morning. And he chose principle over all of it. Not because dying was good, but because the alternative required him to publicly abandon the one thing he had spent his life defending. That it matters how you act, not just how you're perceived. Now bring that forward to where you actually live. You probably don't face anything like that choice. But you face smaller versions of it constantly, and the mechanism is identical. Someone at work gets the credit for something you did. You stay quiet because speaking up feels risky. Someone in your family says something you know is wrong, about a person, about a situation. And you nod along because the dinner table isn't the place. You watch a decision get made that you think is a mistake, and you don't say anything because you worried about how it will land. Every one of those moments is the question Socrates was asking. Is doing the right thing conditional on it being safe? Or is it something you do regardless? Most people have quietly decided it's conditional. And they've built an entire internal language to explain why. It's not worth the fight. I'll say something next time. They wouldn't listen anyway. The reasons feel different each time. The pattern is always the same. What he'd push back on isn't the specific choices. He understood that context matters and not every battle is worth fighting. What he'd push back on is the way people let the habit of staying quiet harden into a personality. You do it often enough, and it stops feeling like a choice. It starts feeling like just who you are. Someone who goes along. Someone who doesn't make trouble. Someone practical. He'd call that the most impractical thing imaginable. Because the version of yourself that never speaks from genuine conviction gradually becomes a person you do and fully respect. And that quiet loss of self-respect is far more expensive than whatever discomfort you avoided. His actual prescription was simple. Not easy, but simple. Before you go along with something, ask yourself one question. Am I doing this because it's right, or because it's easier? Not to judge yourself. Just to know, because knowing is the starting point. Everything else follows from being honest about that distinction. The people who went along with the popular opinion in Athens voted to execute the most honest man their city ever produced. They did it to protect their comfort. He knew they would. He let them anyway. Because, in his view, their approval was never the point. What you do when no one is rewarding you for doing it, that's the only real measure of character. He gave up his life to prove he believed that most of us won't face anything close to that test. But the question he kept asking is still sitting there, every day, in small moments, and occasionally large ones. Is the thing being called good actually good? Or is it just popular? He left the answer to you. He just made sure you couldn't pretend you never heard the question. Subscribe if this stayed with you. The next one goes somewhere just as uncomfortable.